Patrick Cook here. So welcome to session number 7 of the Mandelbulb Epic Rendering tutorial series. You know, I named this tutorial series Epic. All right, I like that word, epic. I like the word because I wanted the title to continuously remind us that we can go past the limitations of rendering a graphic, all right, with the Mandelbulb software application, as long as we know how to do it. Now, I'm gonna kind of give you an advanced peek as to how we do it, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time with it yet because, you know, there's a certain order of things. Look, just because you can render something out at a massive resolution doesn't mean that you want to. In other words, me personally, I'm not going to spend the time in creating a massive high-resolution image file for whatever reason I have for it, whether it's print or some other clever artistic things that we'll talk about later. I'm not going to spend the time on that unless I really love the fractal image. I mean, I got to love it. If I'm going to put you know, a 30 by 20 or a 36 by 24 print on my wall, well, I want to make damn sure that I can live with that thing up on my wall. So I have to love the graphic before I do that. But we'll get to loving the graphic a little later on in the series. But what I wanted to show you right now is that we do have the ability, there is a tool here in the Mandelbulb software application where we can work around or work within the memory limitation. Remember now, this is a 32-bit software application. It's not ever likely to be updated to a 64-bit. A 32-bit application is going to have less memory that it can access, and therefore less memory that Windows will allocate to it in order to do its work. And that's just the way it is. So we need a limitation. We need a way around the limitation. If you go over to the Tools menu and you click on Big Render, we have a tool here that will allow us to take that the big render and slice it up into what are called tiles. All right, now these tiles are, well, I'll tell you what, let's get our whiteboard up here, get my stylus here. Let's say we have a big, we want to do a big render. For whatever reason, the big render is, you know, whether it's a print or something else, put all that aside for now. All right, and we know, oh, I don't know, let's just say that let's stop. We know that the main rendering window just can't handle that. It just runs out of memory, or it won't even get enough memory to even start the render. So one way around this is, well, what if we were to just render a chunk of this at a time? So render that. Now that stays within the memory limitations. Well, you know, it's fairly easy to render a small chunk of that. And then let's say, well, what if we were to render a second small chunk of that, and that stays within the memory too, the memory limitation. All right, we'll do another, that chunk, okay. So the point is that these smaller chunks of this big render, we render those out individually. We stay within the limitations of the memory. All right, and then we do it again. And we do this one, and we do this one, and so on and so forth, okay? So what we have here, let me clean this up a bit. What we have is what's called tiling. And what the software does is it divides up this big image by what are called rows. All right, this is a row. And columns. All right, this is a column. All right, so row, column, like that, and like that. Okay, this is referred to as a grid. Sometimes it's referred to as a matrix. But now the software will go and render this tile, and then render this tile, and write a file to it. Of course, write the file. Right, and render this in memory, write the file, render this in memory, write the file, and so on and so forth until it's finally done. And then that's written out to a file too. So when you're all done, you've got a bunch of these files here. You got a file, you get a bunch of files like that. All right. Now this here is a 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we're going to have 12 files. They're either JPEG or they're PNG files. They're image files, okay? All right. So this is called tiling. Tiling. T-I-L-I-N-G. These are tiles. Each of these are tiles. And this is a way that the Mandelbulb3D application, and it's not new, this has been around for a long time, and plenty of other applications will do this too. It's a way of being able to divide up the rendering of a large, higher resolution image into smaller segments, sections, or tiles that can each be rendered well within the memory limitations that the application is having to contend with. It's very fortunate that they included this tool called a Big Render. It's very fortunate that they included that, because we would have just been limited. We could have done things like take a lower resolution. We could take a lower resolution, and we can use software to upscale it. We could do that, and there's a number of image editing software, Photoshop, GIMP, a lot of the catalog management software will do that. There's other very specific software that only does upscaling and downscaling. So we could do that. We could do that. I mean, I could output this at 9,000 by 6,000, and then run it into another piece of software that would double, triple, quadruple the size. That software is doing the same thing as what I talked about in the previous session of printers that will run your electronic file through this software and upscale it. In order to upscale it, you have to add pixels. In order to downscale it, you take pixels away. All right. The Mandelbulb software application with this tiling capability gives us the ability to target for a high resolution image file once the tiles are recombined with the native pixels. In other words, without upscaling or downscaling. So this Big Render tool allows us to have our graphic rendered with pixels that are native to the rendering. In other words, those pixels are not artificially inserted by another piece of software somewhere else. Those inserted pixels are essentially faked pixels They do a good job, but they're not native. They're added. They're added after the fact. This Big Renders tool gives us the ability to have the native or the real pixels rendered into the image, not added later. That is a very significant advantage, and it's accomplished with the process of tiling. All right, so digest that, get yourself a cup of coffee or heat up whatever you have, and I'll see you in the next session. I'll see you there.